Welcome everyone to another episode of Dynamics Corner. I am always curious how things are made and the stories they share. I'm your co-host, Kris.
And this is Brad. This episode was recorded on December 22nd, 2025. Kris. How it's made, how things are made.
Yeah.
I'm fascinated by that. And you'll hear in this episode. And I'm also fascinated with how AI is working in the manufacturing industry. With us today, we had the opportunity to speak with Bryan DeBois. Hey, Bryan, good afternoon. How are you doing?
Hey guys, how you doing?
You want me to lie or tell you the truth?
Doing well. Yeah.
Oh, you gotta tell us the story, dude. Tell us the story, Brad. What happened? Maybe a fun one. I think it's a fun story.
This is just, it's par for the course for this day. So it's close to Christmas. So I just went to the supermarket, market, store, whatever anybody calls it. I don't know. It depends on where you're listening. And I wanted to get in before the Christmas rush to buy groceries so that I could make Christmas dinner on Christmas Day. And I didn't want to go too far out because the food would potentially spoil. You know, you do meats and fruits and vegetables.
Okay.
And you don't want to do it too close because, one, it will be insane. And two, we're in the middle of tourist season and snowbird season. And if you ever visited snowbird season, snowbirds don't move too fast, and they flock to the stores. And not only do they flock to the stores, but they're the types that will push their cart in the parking lot at like an angle, so the cars can't go up and down. So they walk slowly from one side to the other. It's almost like when individuals park, walk in crosswalks. They don't walk straight across the street. They like almost take the longest angle possible. So I went to the store and I was like, oh, this is great. I'll go a little early, beat the lunchtime rush, and be back for lunchtime for this. And wouldn't you know, I got outside. My car was doing an update.
No.
Yes. And I'm like, what is going on? So I don't know how it got into doing an update, because I've been letting the update sit. And literally this update has been sitting there for a couple weeks.
It did a forced update on you.
It did an update on me while I was in the parking lot. So I put all my groceries in the trunk of the car.
Yeah.
Now, mind you, it's not like back home in the Northeast where you could, during this time of year, I leave food outside anyway this time of year because it's cold enough that it's like a refrigerator.
Right.
And you get a little further in the season, you could actually leave like ice cream and ice and stuff outside. Back when I used to drink beer, by the way, I used to dig, and we used to have a lot more snow when I was younger. We used to actually dig snowbanks. You own the snowbanks? Used to pile up the snow, and I used to box out in the snowbank a room for beer.
Yeah.
You just leave it outside, and then the same type of thing around the holidays. If you having meats, you just kind of throw it in there. It's almost like an ice box. It is an ice box actually because it's snow. It's snow. So anyway, so it did the update, and I'm thinking, one, I'm not going to get back. Two, when is this thing ever going to be done? It was like watching paint dry. It took 50 minutes.
No.
Yes.
It does warn you that says it could be up to 55 minutes. So it's pretty close there. You got 50 minutes.
Usually, though, when it's outside, I don't care. I don't know what triggered it to do it.
Right.
But it did it.
Were you stuck in the car? You can't get out, right?
I could get out. Thankfully. There was a couple points where it starts like clicking. So I knew it was doing something. I was able to put the windows down because it'll just be a couple of minutes. I'll just sit here because for a while the AC stayed on. But then once the AC died for like 40 minutes, I'm like, oh, this is over. I was sitting there so still that the birds were landing on the car. So I could hear these little things. And then I started hearing these clickings. I'm like, is somebody throwing something at the car? So anyway, I rushed back for our lunchtime fun.
You made it on time.
I made it on time. And almost choked eating lunch, but that's okay.
Brad, this is a Tesla?
Yes.
Okay.
That's so weird. It forced update you because it does have to. You have to tell it to say yes. I acknowledge that I could be sitting here for 55 minutes. It's wild that it just did it for you.
I do like the update because the map looks better, and then it also has the. I didn't have the chance to enable it, but it has the Santa's toys feature Santa. Now too. I want to see that. What is the dash cam? There's an update for the dash cam thing too, the dash thing.
So when it records, when you're doing a dash cam, so it used to be very limited in view. Now it actually uses the other camera pillars as well. So now you have a full 360 for your dash cam. Oh. So it's pretty neat. That's because everyone complains about that, right? Like, oh, it's getting all the other angles except it's not using the pillar cameras. So they've enabled that. So now you have a full 360.
Got it. I can't wait to check out the update. Can't wait to enable the Santa's toys and see what some of the other things are out there.
What you need to do, all right. So I did this in my Tesla. You can change the chime when you walk away and it locks, right, and makes those weird noises. You can change that chime. So what we did, my son and I, used the movie from Elf, Buddy the Elf, when that walrus or whatever a character says, hey, bye, buddy. Yeah. I hope you find your dad. So we have that turned on. So every time we walked away, it would chime that way. You should do something like that.
We'll talk afterwards. I'll enable that because I want to start having fun with this. And mind you, listen, I love the vehicle. I'm not complaining about it at all. I'm just complaining that I had to sit in the sun because I don't even know how to drive anymore. Not that I ever drove well, but now forget it because I put that thing on. And now that it goes point to point, and it's, I went out for dinner the other night and it found a parking spot for me.
Heck yeah.
It's awesome. It's just great.
It's awesome.
I can't wait to the point where we just get into a vehicle and you can do things.
Yeah, right. And because you still have to have your hands on the wheel, right? In a Tesla?
No, not necessarily. You just have to pay attention.
Your eyes have to pay attention. It does have hands free. I don't understand it in the latest update on or off because it can detect now if you're using your cell phone. So it doesn't. It warns you if you're using your cell phone, like and you're distracted driving. Right. Yes, the cameras catch you, and also you don't have to necessarily hold on, but I position my hands like I pull my legs up. And I keep my hands on my knees, so it may look like I'm near the steering wheel. And every now and then, you have to put some pressure on the steering wheel, which is fine. I don't mind any of those safety features to make sure you're paying attention. But to this day, the vehicle sees things far before me, or long before me. So I'm not. I haven't put the
trigger on the whole Tesla thing yet. It's on my radar. I was really kind of waiting until like that point to point. That was really so. The last cycle I went looking for a new car was 2019, and it wasn't there yet. So I was like, well, I'll kind of wait and see until we get to that point to point. And now that that's kind of there, now I'm thinking it might be time.
Once you go for a drive, I can guarantee that you'll pretty much want one because it handles extremely well. And now you have the different modes. You can put chill mode, snail. I think it's snail, chill, standard, and hurry.
Oh no, Mad Max. They added Mad Max.
Okay, I haven't got that. I put it in hurry mode, and I thought I was going to die.
No, Mad Max is worse, dude.
That thing, standard is good for me. It goes with the flow of traffic. So it's anytime I'm in it, I feel like it's in control. I'm not trying to say anything ill about it because I love the vehicle. Hurry mode's a little too fast for me because it starts to swerve. I'm one of those. I drive like a grandpa for real.
Brad, you gotta check. I think you have Mad Max in yours. I'm pretty sure the update. There's Mad Max.
I'm not looking at it. My daughter even says that the car drives better than me. So I am one of those. I'm far right. Speed limit's 50. I'm going 50, and I'm just going along. So the vehicle drives better than me. It will pass. It will do things. And anytime someone's in the vehicle with me, they're like, "Wow, this is good. We're actually getting somewhere." So anyway, that was my story. So I am a little hurried, but we made it. And speaking of AI and such, would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, for sure. So, Bryan DeBois and this is a kind of our second time together. We did our previous recording earlier this year. So, for those of you, your listeners who maybe didn't get a chance to listen to that one, Bryan DeBois, I'm the director of industrial AI for a company called RoviSys. Now, we are a company that focuses on system integration specifically for manufacturing and industrial customers. And we only work in what we call the OT space. So that's operational technology. That's what that stands for, OT. And that is different from IT. So this is the world where assets and equipment make a physical change to the real world, right? So IT is about moving data and information. OT is about machines that actually do things and make things happen in the real world. And so that is what we typically refer to ourselves as, is an OT-SI, an OT system integrator. The company's been around for 36 years. I've actually been at RoviSys for 25 years now. Started out, my background is I've got a computer science degree from the University of Akron. And I've been working in this OT space my entire career. Been in a lot of factories, and for the last 6.5 years now, I've been focused on bringing industrial AI to the manufacturing customers that we service. And so I'm sure that's what we'll be talking about today.
Absolutely. When you say OT space, you know what I think.
What's that?
Outer space.
Oh,
it's outer space. You work in outer space. No, thank you for joining us again. And within the world of AI, with several guests that work with AI in different industries or different areas, as you had mentioned, it's not always just software technology. There's, as you had mentioned, machinery or asset technology. We're again talking about the Tesla, which is it's a vehicle technology. I'd like to do some follow-ups because AI is moving so rapidly that if you blink, you may miss an update or miss what's going on. So it's been several months since we had spoke with you last about how AI is enhancing manufacturing industry within machinery. Yeah. I wanted to jump back in with you to see what other changes that you've witnessed, experienced, or how you've seen businesses adopt AI with machinery or AI automation or OTSI or outer space.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, let's jump into it. So I think that even in the time since we spoke last, there's been some interesting advances. So one of those is that we are seeing more and more of an uptick of folks who are starting to look into adopting AI on the plant floor. This has always been, I've been at it for 6.5 years, but it's always been a little bit of an uphill battle because there are folks who are like, we're not ready yet. And so now finally we're starting to see folks who are ready, and they're ready to have those initial conversations. Now, whether or not their data infrastructure is ready, and we can talk about that, that's kind of a separate thing. But they're finally ready to start embarking on this. The other interesting change that I've seen in the last 6 months is in fact, I think you guys asked me this question last time, like, where do these use cases come from? Where do the ideas come from in terms of adoption of AI on the plant floor? And we talked about how we do these AI workshops and we try to prime the pump and get them thinking about AI. And so then they can help generate ideas. Now, one of the changes I'm seeing is when I sit down with them and have that initial conversation, they are typically coming to the table with 3 to 5 pretty solid, typically, AI use cases that they've generated on their own. And then that actually makes my job a lot easier because then I just have to vet those ideas, those use cases. I can say, hey, out of these 5, let's focus on these 2. These seem to be the lowest hanging fruit. And a big part of that then is how do we connect that to the ROI that is going to be required to make these projects a success. One of the things, I've been at this long enough now that one of the primary conversations I tend to have with customers is, look, these projects don't typically succeed or fail based on technical problems. Like, we can get over all the technical issues. They succeed or fail typically based on internal political types of issues.
100%.
And a big part of that is, did did we do a good enough job, and did the customer do a good enough job of connecting that project, that AI project, whatever the technology is, to an outcome, to an ROI? And can they go to the bean counters and the folks who are above them in the C-suite and stuff and say, hey, we got 20% improvement, we got 15% improvement, we got millions of dollars, saved every year, or increased our throughput by X number of percentage? If they can't do that, then I typically put the brakes on very quickly, and I go, hey guys, I know this looks like a really cool use case. It's super sexy. It would be really awesome, but I don't know that the ROI is there. And because the other aspect of this is in an industry like industrial, like manufacturing, that is just now starting to adopt AI, you kind of get one swing at this. You get one shot to do your first project, and it better be a home run, right? Because otherwise you're not going to get any more at bats. So I got to make sure that I'm vetting those AI project ideas that we're getting, the lowest hanging fruit and stuff that's really meaty right out of the gate.
You hit on several points for this, for me, and I wanted to see in your experience where some of these points fit. Spit them out there. Hopefully we can remember to get to them. One, you talked about adoption. We're at a different rate of adoption.
Yeah.
Is the rate of adoption changing because of comfort? Is the resistance less? And what is usually the biggest cause of resistance? Is it people being fearful of the technology because they're afraid it's going to replace them, fearful of the technology because it's not going to work? And then another part, there's 3 points I wanted to remember, but again, with the morning that I'm having, we'll see what happens. The other point is that you also spoke about the ROI. And I see this in technology everywhere, that oftentimes projects fail because sometimes people like to do things because it's the cool thing to do. I want to do this because it's cool. So what are some exercises that somebody can do to go through and validate that they will have a proper return on the investment? Again, because you may not get the return on the investment that you think of by implementing something. Again, if you build a system that will pick something up and move it across the room, but you only need to do that one time, and it takes you 6 months to build that system, you're really not getting the return on the investment, as for example. So, and then I'll get back to the third point on that. But I want to go back to the first point of, you had mentioned you have witnessed an uptick in adoption, or at least curiosity to try to explore and implement the use of AI. Where do we fit with that and the resistance to it as well?
Yeah. So kind of two parts there. Why we're seeing an uptick? I think part of that is that I think our industry is getting more sophisticated. So I think that, and I think you guys are my 33 or 34th podcast appearance on various manufacturing, industrial, business podcasts, right? So I'm getting the word out there. I'm hopefully helping in this effort to make our industry more sophisticated in their thinking about this. But there's other thought leadership that's happening around this that are getting people to realize that, part of it, we talked last time about generative AI has been a blessing and a curse. It's been a blessing in that it's getting people to think and talk about AI. It's been a curse in that that's not typically the AI that we're implementing on the plant floor. So they're starting now to get sophisticated enough to know that there's different types of AI, that they have different strengths and weaknesses and limitations, and where you should use the different types of AI. So now when I'm getting into those calls, they have a level of sophistication that actually enables us to start having productive conversations right out of the gate. Where did that resistance come from? I think it came from a lot of different areas. I just talked to a steel customer a couple weeks ago, and they said our CEO just reiterated his policy: no AI here. Won't do it, can't do it, whatever. Now, there's probably a generational aspect there. I think their CEO is kind of fairly old, maybe baby boomer-ish. And so, I think that there's some aspect to that. I'll tell you. So I'm a Gen Xer, proud Gen Xer. There's very few of us, by the way. I don't know if you've ever looked into the generational, but Gen X is actually the smallest generation. That's why you don't run into many Gen Xs.
I was going to ask if you had witnessed, or if your increase in inquisitiveness about AI is due to a generational change in leadership. Number one. Number two, yes. Kris, can you look up I don't want to make
years?
Clicking here. The years, because I don't know what I am.
1965 to 1980.
Yeah.
Is
and
if your birthday.
And then you get that little gap, I think they said between 1980 and 83 or 84, where they have the Zennials, where it's just correct. Like they still had that combination of like Gen X and sort of millennials. Different, by the way, different kind of people. I've met them. And then the actual millennials were, maybe closer to like 86 to 90s is when they AOL, things like
65 to 80. So I fall into the Gen X. And I don't want to digress. Now, you're saying it's the smallest generation.
Yes.
But
just in terms of head count.
I also think we're the generation that has gone through the most. And I'll cover that in a moment. But how do they come up with the years? Wouldn't you think that they would all be equal? Like if we're talking generation here.
No, I think that there's certain things where there's specific cultural things that happen, like the internet, that just create this natural, like, division between different cultures and stuff like that. But anyway, where I was going with that, yes, I think the fact that baby boomers are retiring in droves, that we're losing that expertise out of the plant, but they're also taking with them some of their preconceived notions. And so I think that the leadership that is remaining are younger. They're primarily millennials, and that they are much more willing to look into this. Now, I reached a milestone in my career, though, guys. A couple of weeks ago, I called my wife after I left a meeting, and I said, "Well, Tiff," I said, "it finally happened. I was the oldest person in the meeting. Everyone on the other side." Everyone on the other side of the table on the customer side, they were all millennials. All the people from RoviSys that were there, my company, they were all millennials, and I was the oldest guy in the room. But
how does that make you feel? Because I've had conversations talking about references and things, and now I'm getting, I wasn't even born then.
Oh yeah, no, that's fun.
It's starting to shift now. Now we've become the other side. When we started our careers, we're the other side, where now we're the old guys.
We are the old guys. So okay, so to get to that, so what is that like? So what I saw across the table is they were overwhelmed. I was working with the plant manager, and he's a millennial, and again, like, he's got high turnover. He's lost all the SMEs, all the leadership in that plant that knew how to keep that plant running, and he just looked overwhelmed. And so again, and we touched on this a little bit last time, AI then can be that bridge to help. So for him, he's like, yes, like, whatever we can do here, I have a serious problem. What are the technologies we can bring in? So AI is not the only answer, but it's part of the answer to be able to get to be able to fill that gap, that expertise gap, and be able to get his novice operators, these operators that are not going to stick around for very long. Most people are seeing an entry-level manufacturing job as, like a 6-month type of thing, maybe a 3-month, maybe a couple week thing, and then they lose interest and they're going to move on to the next job. So how does this guy, this plant manager, how does he continue to get high levels of performance, not have quality issues? This happened to be a food and beverage customer, not have serious quality issues where you got to issue expensive recalls and things like. How do you avoid all that and still be able to put out good product while you've got a workforce that has changed so drastically? So for him, he was welcoming. He was like, yes, give me your ideas. I need it all. Yeah. So
it is. I was wondering how much is that generationally, because I see a shift in leadership, and I think that generation grew up with technology. So they're less resistant to technology, more trusting of technology. But it's still, to me, it comes back down to the proper application of technology. Granted, some things are invented as byproducts of multiple technologies, and people are doing some experimentation to see it. But I think not having the fear of it and then finding a place to implement at the proper points is helpful. And as you had mentioned, with, I think, a reduction in workforce, there are some functions that are monotonous, mundane, and that basically are repeatable. And it's those repeatable functions that you can try to automate. Yes. So I'm glad to see there's a shift, there's an uptake in the adoption of AI. So what have you seen with the adoption of it?
Where we're starting to see, so you asked about kind of ROI.
Yes.
So where are we seeing that adoption, and what is driving that ROI? So again, like in a lot of cases, We're seeing it in things like changeover. So there's a long arc that's been happening for decades now in manufacturing, where we've gone from, when I started my career in the early 2000s, it was a high volume, low mix, right? So you were making the same thing and just cranking out the same product over and over again. We have seen over the decades, and you guys are a little higher on the more logistics, supply chain, like ERP side, so you're probably seeing this in terms of like configuring these bombs and things like that. We're seeing now high mix, low volume, right? Everyone wants their own configuration of that product. We want customized this, and and that's. And I'm seeing it across all the different industries that we service, right? It doesn't matter if you're servicing automotive, downstream, or you're servicing, you're in CPG. Everyone wants their own customized thing. We need 10 versions of this product, not just the one. And so, in a lot of cases, that changeover, okay, so that's the term that we use when you're changing between different products on a line, that changeover starts to become really expensive. It was one of those things that in the past, it was just kind of the cost of doing business, and it didn't become a serious, kind of cost driver. But now that changeover becomes a big problem, especially when you have operators that don't know how to optimize for changeover, right? So like, oh, we're running a whole nother product, man, I gotta start all over again. And so changeovers then go from 2 hours to 6 hours to 8 hours between changing over between different products. So one of the primary ROIs that I'm seeing over and over again brought up by customers is, let's see if we can optimize changeover. Let's see if we can get to a level of changeover that's as fast as our experts were at being able, let's see if we can get back to a 2-hour changeover instead of a 4-hour changeover. And look, even if we can shave an hour off and get to 3 hours, we're in much better shape than we are now. And I've had multiple customers that have said that's $1 million problem. Annual ROI on that problem. If we can shave an hour or two off of changeovers, that's a huge thing. Now, there's a lot that goes into that, because so in any kind of changeover, you typically have sequencing issues where I can't make this product after this product, maybe without a washdown. So we did a project for a major paint manufacturer that you guys have all heard of. And, they've got very specific rules, as you can imagine, around tints. So like, I can make this product after this product, so I can go from a lighter tint to a darker tint of paint without a washout in between. But if I'm going to go from a darker shade to a lighter shade, I got to make sure that I schedule a washout of the equipment. And every industry has something like that, where I can make this product after this product, but not vice versa. So knowing that and being able to incorporate that into the AI, but then part of it too is that every changeover requires a certain amount of scrap. So you're just going to run for a while, and until you get to what they call steady state, until you get all the parameters kind of tuned in and you're making good product, in that starting time, now you're just making scrap. And that's where, again, we can easily optimize that and shave off that time where you're making garbage and get to making steady state product much, much faster. And so now, boom, that's an instant ROI. So we can talk about some of these other things where people think you're going to get ROI, like predictive maintenance, and we can talk about that, and we can talk about energy optimization, and those are all great use cases. But honestly, changeover has, for whatever reason, seems to have dominated the conversation within the last 6 months.
And how has AI helped with that changeover? So if we are getting a return on investment for the changeover, and it's great examples, and it's working with different businesses of different industries, I'm always fascinated by what it takes to make things. Sometimes you don't even think about what goes into producing a product. Even your reference was something as what we would call simple as paint usually is a little more complex. I one time worked with someone who manufactured soap, and I had no idea that soaps and shampoos, with the recipes, with all of this, was such an involved industry. And just listening to you talk about that brings back memories. Again, that's another sign of aging, because now I think back of when I was younger, I saw
stories to tell.
I have lots of stories to tell. But in the case of changeover, in this case, you're talking how AI can assist an organization to decrease the time of changeover to help them have more production runs because they're having less downtime for washout, as you had referenced, or changing over other pieces of machinery so that they can produce a product. How is AI helping with that task?
Yeah. So there's a couple different ways. Sometimes it's just a matter of reducing the amount of that scrap, that startup scrap that is typical of any kind of changeover. So if I can get to making on-spec product faster, then I can reduce the amount of that scrap. And so what does that look like? That can be as simple as I'm giving the AI is giving better set points. And, so the set points are the things that control, again, for your listeners, the set points are the things that control that process, right? It could be, what's the temperature? What's the pressure at this point in the process? What's the heat? If I'm heating up a piece of steel or something, what's the target temperature that I'm going to? That's what's called your set point, right? On thermostat, whatever you set the thermostat to, that's the set point. It's not the current temperature. That's a different thing, right? But that's where you're trying to drive it to, and your thermostat drives to that. In the same thing on the plant floor, we have all these really smart thermostats, effectively, and we have you can set all these different set points, and it will drive to that set point. That's what the control system does. So what are better set points than what I have now? And how can I optimize the sequence of set points? Because oftentimes with startup and changeover, startup's similar. Startup would be like, I have to bring that down the line for some reason and I need to get back going again. It's a similar kind of problem. Like, just to get that flywheel going and get back to making good product, it takes a certain amount of time. So if I can optimize those set points, and expert operators knew how to do this. Like, they'd say, hey, so I tend to crank this for 5 minutes and then I turn the pressure down, and then, but here's the trick, I do this thing, I make this change, or I turn up the RPMs here just in time, and then that's how I'm able to get to making good product faster. Novice operators don't know how to do any of that, right? So that's where the AI can step in. Another thing, so we've got so this is an interesting use case specifically around changeovers. So we've got a company that makes flat glass. So flat glass is like, think windows, doors, big panes of glass. Now, the state of the art, the way they've been making flat glass forever, is you have a bed of molten metal tin, and they extrude the molten glass on top of it. The beauty of that is that gravity does all the work. So the glass will flatten out as much as physically possible just because of gravity. The glass actually floats on top of the molten tin, and it'll flatten itself. Then you have these arms that come out, and they got wheels on the end of them. They're called ADS, or assisted direct stretch arms. There's about 8 of them on each side, so 16 total. And an operator then hooks into the edge of that glass, and as that glass is solidifying, that operator can then push and pull that glass like taffy. And that's how you make different thicknesses and widths of glass, right? Now, when we first sat down with that customer, they said, look, we know how to do this really well, but only our expert operators do we allow them to do changeovers. And why is that? Because it's very easy to lose control of that sheet of glass. And if that happens, it's moving at a pretty good clip. If you lose control of that sheet of glass, it can go crashing into the side of the tin bath, and a lot of bad things happen then. So they only had 2 operators that they trusted to do changeovers. So they got plenty of operators to handle it when you're making the same, just, putting out the same width, same thickness of glass. But for those changeovers, they would literally do what they call crushing glass. So they would just make the glass, and then they would crush it and immediately melt it down, just waste it until that next operator shift started, so that they could come in. Yeah, wow. No kidding, right?
I'm paying attention to this like a kid, because I figure, like, what was that show, How It's Made?
Yeah.
Like, I really am trying to visualize this now. Like, I'm like, this would be a great episode to see how glass is made. That's what
right. I love How It's Made, by the way, just because you mentioned that. So I knew nothing about manufacturing before I came into this industry 25 years ago, but I loved How It's Made. And so now, since then, I've been in probably 100 plants and seen how things are actually.
I am hooked to that.
That's awesome.
I love my job.
Little fun fact for you as we get into that. I did an implementation once, many moons ago, with an organization that I developed. Basic, I guess you call it an extension, but they were using the vision at the time that I created in a whole additional add-on. Kris, this is the one that we were at the conference and somebody talked about this, saying, here it is 20 years later, and we made a business around it. But they were on How It's Made.
Oh,
it was great, because
That's awesome.
I had been in that plant. I had known those individuals, and to see that it was fascinating. It's almost one of those things that it was very interesting. Not to interrupt your story, it's a very interesting story, but you had mentioned that there's only 2 operators that they trust.
Right.
Wow. And I think that is something that's becoming more common. And with that, do you think it's becoming more common because generationally individuals don't stay at an organization long enough to gain the experience? Do you think it can be attributed to maybe those individuals that have that expertise not sharing that expertise and holding on to that expertise because not others can do that? Or do you think it's a lack of, for better terms, interest generationally, where it's I'm just here to stretch glass and oh well.
Yeah. Well, I'm just here to get a paycheck and kind of clock out at the end of the day. And again, like, I'm not, I never get into the whole like this generation's better than. I think every generation had their strengths, weaknesses, different approaches to problem solving. So I don't get into any of that, but it's just a fact that the incoming generation, they're not interested in spending the next 10, 15 years of their life becoming an expert on how to stretch glass. Like, that's just not of interest to them. They have different interests. And I mean, again, like I manage millennials and Gen Zs, right? So RoviSys hires 90% of our hires are right out of college. So we're constantly facing the generation gap. We've been doing the generation gap thing for decades. And so I'm of the mind that there's a lot that you can learn from different generations. Yes. And I'll tell you, I've learned from millennials and Gen Zs about this work-life balance. Gen X had no work-life balance. That wasn't a thing, right? But they've taught me a lot about how to achieve that. So whatever, it doesn't really matter what the drivers are. The point is that they're not going to spend that time to learn how to do that. Well, the plant still has to make product, right? So how do we close that gap? And so that's where, like I said, that's where they're looking to AI. So what was the solution then that we built? So we built, when their expert operators do a changeover, they lay it out, as you can imagine, again, because failure leads to big problems. So they go through a whole process where they write down on a piece of paper, there's a template, and they go through and they say, okay, it's stuff like, you can't make big changes with the glass. So it's stuff like, okay, I'm going to change the angle of these for 3 minutes, and then I'm going to push in for 2 minutes. And that's the process. So they write it all down. You almost think like Apollo 13, like when they were going through their different like checklists, like that's the kind of thing. And then they go and they execute the plan. Now, one thing though that was interesting is we asked them, so do you ever deviate from the plan? No, we don't deviate from the plan. This is the plan, right? And then of course, as you can imagine, we sit down with them, our team sat and we watched them do a bunch of these changeovers, and they deviate from the plan all the time.
That's part of the plan. The deviation.
That's part of the plan. Right. And so they'll go, it said stay at this angle for 3 minutes, and they kind of look at it and they're like, I'm not liking what I'm seeing. And so they stay for 2 more minutes before they make the next move on the plan. And then they do typically document that they made those deviations. So we built for them an AI-driven changeover plan. Now, it's digital. So one thing is we built in the deviations right from the beginning. So we built it like Google Maps. So on Google Maps, you can imagine, it's got a route, it's got a plan, but then if you take a wrong turn or there's a detour or whatever, then it reroutes. It says, okay, rerouting you, and it finds a new optimal plan. That's what our system does. So it's a digital changeover plan that finds new ways of doing things if the real world doesn't cooperate the way that we want it to. And so that we were actually able to put that in the hands of novice operators, and they're able now to execute changeovers as well as their expert operators. And in some cases, one of the secondary goals was to, and remember last time we talked about autonomous AI, this is autonomous AI. So it's that super smart AI, it's the based on deep reinforcement learning. One of the secondary goals it pursues then is try to minimize the total time of the changeover. So don't just get it done as fast as possible, because we talked about changeover, you're not making good product during changeover. That's all scrap that you make during changeover. So let's minimize the amount of time. And so that was a secondary goal of this system, was try to minimize the amount of time.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is amazing.
So now the operator, follows the digital plan or monitors the digital plan. So then you have a higher rate of consistency with product and decrease in change time, which also minimizes waste.
Right. And this is a human in the loop, by the way, process. So we were not directly controlling the process. This was put the plan up on the screen and then monitor to make sure that the operator is doing what they need to be doing. Yeah.
Human in the loop. I hear human in the loop, but now you're talking about AI. I refer to it almost now as a person. I feel like I'm talking with someone. I do a lot with AI from the development point of view, and going through and prompting and seeing the responses and seeing the answers. I find myself saying, "Thank you. You did a good job." And just to see some of the response that comes back, it really is like having a bunch of eager individuals developing for you that are at a certain level. Right?
I think that example is a perfect human in the loop because they still have that control. They're still part of the process. And I think a lot of people are afraid of that, right? With AI being brought into the organization, that they're going to be replaced to some degree or replaced entirely, which is not necessarily the case all the time. It's just enhancing your production, enhancing the business process so that you can be more efficient and then be able to do other things. Or in this case, they could become an expert, right? Because they're learning more. Right. There's something's helping you out to get there.
Right. That makes me think of two things. And, again, I go with what pops to mind. One, I say it often, AI is not going to replace you. Somebody using AI will, because they can gain those efficiencies. And then also individuals are talking about being replaced. I saw something, I don't know, maybe it was in a vision, or I don't know if I was reading. I do a lot of reading. But I forget the way that it was phrased, but it was basically AI, if you're the tool, you're going to be replaced. And this has been happening for generations. It's been happening since the beginning of the Bronze Age. The tools get replaced. The people don't. So if you are the tool, you have a high likelihood of being replaced. If you look at back, we had the horse and buggy. The horse and buggy were the tool to move things, to move people.
Right.
Automobile replaced the horse and buggy. You still moved things. You still moved people. You just used different tools. Same thing in the construction industry. You had hammers, air guns, then power tools. You still have a human, to use the phrase human in the loop somewhere. So that's one way to kind of, like, it opened my eyes to look at it. So you have to look at the functions that you're doing and adapt to use those functions and not be afraid of technology, because technology has been adding to our lives since long before any of us were born. Like I said, you go back to the Bronze Age. At the beginning of the Bronze Age, we made a knife, a sword, and such. The rate of change is far greater now, but we're still there. And then with that, it's see, I lost my train of thought. I was getting so excited. I'm not afraid to admit it.
Part of what you were talking about there, Brad, while you're thinking. So, and it's even more poignant in the manufacturing and industrial sector, because the last number I saw was something like we've got a 500,000 person shortfall in manufacturing. So they can't find people to take these jobs. It's not a question. They wouldn't fire people. Even if somehow I was magically able to, to bring in AI and automate huge, they wouldn't fire those people anyway. They're like, we need these people. Like, we'll put them into other positions. We'll put them into higher value tasks, but we're not going to fire anyone. We can't afford to fire anyone. We're doing everything we can. Like, and, again, better, worse, indifferent. One of the things that I'm seeing at my clients is a newfound respect for culture and a newfound respect for what's this work environment like? And are we creating a work environment? Why? Because they're having to compete for talent. That's not a terrible thing, right? So again, there's positive outcomes that happen. So no, they're not. I've not done any of these projects that have resulted in a reduction in workforce. It just doesn't happen.
I think that's a perfect.
Higher.
I think that's perfect where AI fits in, because there are shortages on some of this industries where you can't find people, because like you point out, Bryan, some generations don't want to do those things. So, but you still have to do those things, and you're relying on people that's been there for a long time, and eventually they're going to move on and retire. But you still have to fill that role. Well, you're trying to fill that role. Nobody maybe wants to do those things, and so that's a perfect opportunity where AI can help mitigate some of those shortcomings as well. So lots of opportunity.
That's the hidden, I don't want to say hidden, but everyone's so, I think it becomes professionally or industry specific. And I say industry specific and function specific because there are certain tasks where everyone's fearful of it. And I'm glad that you brought out that there are shortfalls in some areas because there are tasks that can be automated. There are tasks that are, not to mention, dangerous, that if you can have AI or have automation assist with that, it's less dangerous for someone to work on. You look at some of the, I'm sure you see with some of the manufacturing facilities, and some of these products that individuals are making can be dangerous, whether it's mixing chemicals. We talked about some implementations that I had worked through, or even, I can imagine even working with glass, you have some extreme temperatures and you have molten that could hurt someone. So if you can automate this, and what's close to my world is I'm more into the software application point of software design. So it's a little bit different. It's a different perspective on the use and the implementation of AI. And that's what I was thinking of when you were talking about where you had the shortfall of individuals and the individuals aren't available to do those functions, which is why we may have a deficit in certain industries and certain products. It's not because of lack of need. It's a lack of function because we don't have those to do it. So AI can also help make for a safer workplace, just like with my vehicle making me drive or driving me around makes the roads a lot safer. So it is.
We should welcome that. I mean, both in the United States and globally, like, I'm in these plants and I would never call out any specific companies or whatever, but I'm in these plants. I'm like, boy, that doesn't look great. Like what I'm seeing over there, like that looks like not a great situation to have a human that close to the process or having to interact with the machinery at that point in time.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of scary. And so, yeah, we should welcome that. We want humans to be as far away from these processes as possible. Let's put robots in there. Let's put AI. Let's put automation, and let's get people out of those situations. I was talking to a coworker of mine. He's like, man, I just got back from a plant, and he's like, that was one of the scariest things I've seen. He said, and there was a press and a guy. And this is in America. Like, this is not, and someone is literally like putting stuff in and then pulling it out, like in time with the press. I'm like, this was like, he's like, this is an hour up the road. This was not in, we see these videos from other countries and stuff where, we don't have OSHA and they don't have those type of programs. But we don't want that. So let's leverage the technologies we have to make people safer. And again,
I think it's
as this new workforce is like, I'm not doing that. Right?
Exactly. Well, no one's supposed to do it.
I think it's because of maybe exposure or understanding as well as why someone's not doing it. And I do respect what you had mentioned about generationally, because there are different types in every generation. I think, to me, I look at generation as more of how you grew up, because sometimes how you grew up, what existed, even if you look at the boomers or any that had gone through the Depression, they save everything. Right? They'll use every scrap of every piece of everything. Why? Because they lived through the Depression and they realized that you had to ration things and you couldn't waste things. So I think that's where it comes into play. But I do think that having the mindset of maybe having at some point some resistance to say, hey, that's not safe. That's not something that I want to do, because I don't even want to say you could get hurt, but also if you have some individuals doing some of these monotonous tasks that can be automated, repeated, you don't have to worry about someone being tired, fatigued,
right?
And which also could affect your output, and it also could be a hazard for that individual or others near them as well. So with AI and all of these inventions or enhancements that we have to an organization, whether it be from the software, within the manufacturing plant, and our ability to solve problems, do you ever seeing it plateau? And what I mean by plateau is it's almost like the AI paradigm, where AI learns based on what it knows. It doesn't create new things. Right? It takes a collection of all of the world's knowledge that has been created by individuals, and you can use it in manufacturing, as you had mentioned, for assessing the proper temperatures or proper pressure, or you had mentioned moving the width of glass and the stretch on the glass. Do you ever think there would get to be a point where we plateau? And I know me personally, when I was growing up, yes, I did use an abacus. Yes, I did use a slide rule. Abacus was a little more for fun. The calculator was invented. I looked it up when I was born, but we didn't use them until later. I used to do math in a moment. And now sometimes I joke when I say to someone, like, what's 2 times 100? Or, give me what's 125 divided by 3.
Yeah.
A lot of times now individuals think about it, or even I had a conversation with someone this morning. Do you remember when you used to remember everyone's phone number?
Yeah.
Now, if I lost my phone, I wouldn't call anybody because I have no way of getting in touch with someone. So do you think as we rely more on AI, whether it be in the manufacturing industry, AI automation, and such as the great things that your organization's doing, or in the software world or any other place where you implement AI, that we will reach a plateau?
Yeah. So it's a really good question. And here's the good news. And I know we're coming up on time here, so I'll leave you guys with this point. So the good news is that this industry is ripe for AI. We won't hit any kind of plateau for a long, long time. So here's the analogy I typically talk about. So we've got this renewed focus on onshoring and U.S.-based manufacturing, right? And that's great. And I'm all for it. I'm a U.S. citizen. I was born and raised in Ohio and raising my kids in Ohio, and I love this country. So great. So okay. So we want U.S.-based manufacturing. Here's the reality. Is that most people who aren't in this industry, who aren't in plants every single day, they think that manufacturing factories, that you've got all these robots flying around and you've got, it's super high tech and there's, barely any people out there. Maybe there's one person in a glass control room making everything happen and there's just like a room full of robots. That does not describe US-based manufacturing in the slightest, okay? There is still so much of manufacturing that is an art, not a science, where the outcome, the quality of that product or the speed that you can make that product is materially tied to how good of an operator you have, right? That's an art, not a science at that point. That's not just I just need someone to press a button and it'll make product. That's someone going out in the line and saying, well, it kind of looks a little thick, so I'm going to run it for a couple more minutes and see if I can thin this down, right? So that's a problem, because when you have a workforce then, so the incoming workforce, the way that they are approaching these types of factory jobs is like McDonald's. Okay, so let's look at McDonald's. When McDonald's goes out into the market, they don't go out looking for cooks like a diner hires a cook, right? They go out looking for people. And then they put them in front of a machine, and we've all seen the videos, like that person then loads a bunch of frozen pucks into a machine and they press a button and the machine does all the work and out comes burgers. And then they they pull the burgers out and then they load the pucks again. So McDonald's has automated, and especially now where they've got the screens that you can type out, they have automated virtually as much as you can automate, right? Short of now you get into diminishing returns. So you need some people to do some certain things, but for the most part, they've automated. That's what people think factories work like. They don't. But that's where we have to get to, because if we've got a workforce that is going to quit in 2 weeks, and you've got to be able to train someone in a couple hours and get them making product and being productive in a couple hours of training, you've got to have machines that are much smarter than they are today, that have more automation, more robotics, more AI to be able to overcome that gap. And so that's where we have to get to. So to answer your question, Brad, the sky's the limit. There's so much work to be done here in the United States. And in a lot of ways, for whatever reasons, again, globalization, free trade, you can, whatever, it doesn't matter. All of these things have led to, in a lot of ways, the U.S. manufacturing kind of lagging. in a lot of cases, and in a lot of ways it was because we were going up against countries where you can just throw bodies at the problem. You can just have 15 people working on that part of the line, and you don't have OSHA safety standards either. So like all that stuff that we've been talking about all plays into it, and you could, so if we're going to outcompete, we have to do it smarter. We've got to make the machine smarter. We've got to be able to close that expertise gap, and we need to be able to get it to the point where that person on the line really doesn't have to think. They don't really have to make judgment calls. The guy at McDonald's is not making a judgment call as to whether or not the burger's done. The machine does all that. So that's where we have to get to if we truly want to be as competitive as I think everyone wants to with the rest of the world.
I love the comparison between McDonald's. You're right. I think a lot of people have that misconception of what the manufacturing space looks like. And because of that, it kind of ruins, people want to get into that space, and you hit it right on. It's like we have to find a way to get us to be competitive here in this U.S. market in terms of manufacturing.
Well, I guess to make it sexy in a sense, right? And I think you hit it. And I started to think is the hysteria around AI fear-based because it's new, and it's masking because you have the perception, as you had mentioned, that we have all these technologies. Here we are in the United States, all these technologies exist, but it doesn't mean it's being used universally.
Right.
Exactly. Just like I have a Tesla we talked about at the beginning of this episode. You don't have one yet, right? And it's for whatever reason you don't have one. But again, you would think based on conversation, everybody has cars that drive them around because those cars, those vehicles exist. So it is nice to hear. And I think it sheds some light that AI and technology and advances have been occurring for generations and many generations. It definitely isn't going to go away because what is the old saying? Lazy man is the father. Like, what is it? Like the father of inventions, laziness or something like that.
Necessity is
the father of invention. Yeah.
I think people come up with these tools because they don't want to do these tasks. And I'm not saying that's a laziness thing because sometimes
I say productive laziness.
Well, it's because you create things to do things so you don't have to do something. But the fact of, or the act of creating that thing is genius sometimes, right? So it makes it that you simplify your life. So it is good to know. And I think for anyone listening, it's important to realize that the technology is here. The technology is not going to shut down the entire world where we're all going to sit around on the couch and have robots waiting on us. Well, maybe we will, but
I do want to make a quick comment about the manufacturing space. I do feel that here we are a nation of consumers. We consume a lot compared to other places in the world. And so having the idea of like things being manufactured, it's kind of like, oh, it's being done elsewhere. I don't really care. I just want to consume it. And so I think that's maybe one of the reasons why we don't think about the manufacturing here and no one's interested in it. There's so many variables, but I do think about that from time to time, is that we tend to consume. We just order it, it shows up, but don't realize what it took to build something like that.
Yep, for sure.
No, I think it's great. Well, Bryan, thank you very much for taking the time to speak with us again. We appreciate it. It's always a fun conversation. We'll have to follow up. I'm interested to hear a few more stories you have and see what some advances in AI technology within the manufacturing space bring us over the next couple years. I know within our industry, the world is changing daily. I'm sure in yours, it's changing just as rapidly. Maybe it's a little bit sometimes difficult to adopt because you have to change out machinery, change out processes, but it's still, I think, moving at a rapid rate. But I'm interested in hearing it. And if anything, I get to hear some how it's made stories, which I think all those are on Amazon now, by the way. So I've been watching them, and I could put that on. It's almost like a Christmas Story. Christmas Story is my favorite. It's not my favorite, but it's one of those movies that I've seen probably 1,000 times, but I've never sat and watched it end to end because they always play like a 24 hours of Christmas story and you catch it at a certain point. How it's made to me is the same type of thing as I could put that on, just let it run for days in the Twilight Zone. But thanks very much. We appreciate you taking the time to speak with us today. Time truly is the currency of life. Once you spend it, you can't get it back. And anytime someone spends speaking with us, we greatly appreciate, and we appreciate all the great things you're doing with AI. If anyone would like to learn a little bit more about AI in the manufacturing industry, or what RoviSys does, what is the best way to get in contact with you?
I would say the easiest way is go to RoviSys, RoviSys.com, RoviSys.com, and or look me up on LinkedIn, Bryan DeBois on LinkedIn. So great to talk to anyone.
Great. Thank you very much. Have a pleasant holiday season, and look forward to speaking with you soon.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Happy holidays.
Thank you, Kris, for your time for another episode of In the Dynamics Corner Chair. And thank you to our guests for participating.
Thank you, Brad, for your time. It is a wonderful episode of Dynamics Corner Chair. I would also like to thank our guests for joining us. Thank you for all of our listeners tuning in as well. You can find Brad at developerlife.com. That is DVLPRLIFE.com. And you can interact with them via Twitter, DVLPRLIFE. You can also find me at matalino.io, MATALINO.io. And my Twitter handle is Matalino16. And you can see those links down below in the show notes. Again, thank you, everyone. Thank you, and take care.